Hi, I'm Amy.
And I'm Kirsty, and this is our podcast, Love Needs No Words.
So, Kirsty and I met just over a year ago and we bonded over many things, didn't we, Kirst?
We did.
But one of the lovely things that made us even closer was that both of our children have special needs. They go to the same nursery and are in the same year. We also had both of our boys in COVID, and so being our first, we didn't have any other children to compare them to.
Yeah, really strange time. And I think probably what's really interesting as well is that we've both been through the EHCP journey together, which is quite a journey.
Mm.
For those of you that haven't heard what that is, or kind of just at the beginning of hearing those words, an EHCP is an educational healthcare plan for our children. It's very much about making sure that they get the support that they need either in nursery or in school. So we have worked with the settings and with our council local authorities to obtain one of those. And like I said, it's been quite a journey, one that we'll definitely talk a lot more about as we go through this podcast. Some of you might have had a really smooth sailing time getting one of these, but we know that many of you won't have had a plain sailing experience with this. So you know that there's quite a lot of stress surrounding that. So we definitely want to cover that in more detail.
Yeah, lots to discuss on that. And my son Alexander has in the last few months received an autism diagnosis. So throughout the episodes, we want to discuss this in more detail, and we'll be getting guests on every other week to chat about different topics surrounding additional needs.
Yeah, so if anyone would like to hear or particular topics surrounding autism and special educational needs, and there's anything particularly that you'd like us to discuss, please message us on Instagram at Love Needs No Words. That's love_needs no words.
That would be great. So basically, the reason for doing this for me was that when Alex got his diagnosis, I literally searched podcasts to find just parents talking about the highs and lows of parenting a child with autism with no luck. And so we both felt there was a need to do it. So we really hope this is helpful, reassuring, and just nice to hear from two mums that really get what you're going through. As we all know, raising children with additional needs is, and I think we can all agree, really hard at times, but incredibly rewarding. So, Kirsty, was any sort of particular more reasons that you wanted to do this podcast?
Yeah, exactly the same for me. I mean, we are relatively new into this journey. It's been
Mm,
about a year, and when we first found out that Max had special educational needs, I really felt the need to kind of connect with other people who were going through that situation and who
mm,
kind of had the same I just wanted to find someone who was going through the same journey as me. And I've been really lucky to have found friends, but I also wanted to just hear from other people who were maybe further down the line than me, or just felt like I had something in common with them. I found that there was quite a few podcasts looking at more of the kind of intricacies of autism or specific educational needs, but nothing where it just felt like people just having a conversation and a chat about what the real life day-to-day reality is of
yeah,
having children with special needs.
definitely. And we will be talking just about our week and things that have sort of popped up during the week, as well as getting people on to discuss certain topics. So, Kirsty, should we start by talking a bit about our journey and our gorgeous boys? So, yeah, over to you.
Definitely. Okay, so Max, where do I start with Max? So I think for anyone that's met Max, you'll definitely describe him as a child that is absolutely full of energy and very, very cheeky. Um, yeah, so he kind of he was our first child. He was our introduction into parenting, and and what an introduction he was.
Aw.
Yeah. So obviously Amy touched on this earlier, but he was born during COVID, so really strange time I think to have a baby anyway. And one of the kind of things that led us to where we are today was that Max had hearing difficulties as a baby. So not immediately obvious past his hearing checks in hospital. And due to it being COVID, Max was kind of 9 months old really when he first kind of got a cold. And then once he started getting colds, he uh, it was quite obvious that he was suffering really badly from bad ear infections. And this kind of coincided as well with the fact that he was starting to miss his milestones when it came to speech. And I was really fortunate to be surrounded by a really great NCT group. And as well as a great support, one of the things that kind of allowed me was to have a bit of an insight into where other children were at the same age as who were the same age as Max. And I could quite quickly see by sort of 18 months that he wasn't kind of doing the same sounds that the other children were doing, and he just didn't seem to be progressing quite at the same rate. And it's hard because we're obviously told don't compare your children, but my gut instinct as a mum was that there was just something not quite typical about his speech. So
Mm.
um, that obviously coincided with his ear infections, and we felt like we needed to kind of act on that at that point. But obviously, the first year being in lockdown, we didn't see a huge amount of people, and for us specifically, I think that really delayed our sort of indication that there might be special educational needs
I think a
with
lot of
Max.
people could relate to that, Kirst. I
Yeah,
think it was really, really hard to tell, wasn't it? Whether it was lockdown and the fact that you weren't socializing,
yeah.
or was there something more? And when it is your first, you literally have no other child to compare it to. So yeah,
No,
it was a really tough time, wasn't it, to kind of work out whether there was something else going on.
yeah, absolutely. There was lots of, as I said, I was really fortunate with my NCT group and being able to sort of socialize where we could.
Mm,
Lots and lots of very cold walks. But there was a couple of other things that I noticed around his sort of interaction with other people. Things like he was always quite smiley with us, but he was quite serious with other people. So I
mm,
wouldn't, he wouldn't kind of, we wouldn't get the same reaction. But I just really felt like that was just his personality as a baby. Again, not really having the opportunity to kind of go to play dates and see a wide variety of other children. I just thought that this was Max. So um, when it came down to sort of the speech, like I said, I really started to notice that things weren't kind of progressing in the way that we felt like maybe other children of his age were. So we ended up getting his ears tested, as well as obviously seeing a consultant for his ear infections. And basically, at 2, he was identified as having glue ear, and this was causing problems with his hearing. And so he had grommets at this point, which actually made a huge difference. And sort of within about 6 months, his speech had come on hugely. Um, and I think with that in mind, we felt like, okay, that obviously was the reason for the speech delay. And in
mm,
fairness, that could have been a contributing factor. I guess we'll never know when it
mm.
comes to that. But yeah, the grommets made a massive, massive difference. And I know waiting lists for grommets are really, really long, and there's probably a lot of people in the boat where their child's speech isn't coming on. And we know that ear, nose, and throat concerns often kind of coincide with speech delays. So Max was fortunate enough to have grommets, and we know that that made a big difference to him. Um, yeah, and just in a matter of months, the words really started to come. So we felt like, great, fantastic. But there were some other things that had kind of started to come out the woodwork as well. Things like him being very overstimulated in certain situations. And we also started to notice there was a bit of a trend with biting. However, obviously, biting can be very typical of children and toddlers at a certain age. So these things weren't necessarily things that we were kind of were red flags to us at that point, until Max joined a new nursery at 3, and it was picked up to us by our actually amazing Senko, the special educational needs coordinator at their nursery. And she, at that point, identified that she believed that there was something kind of neurotypical going on with Max. She also started to notice that he was struggling with anxiety, and that there was differences in his play So if one of the teachers was away, he'd find that quite difficult to cope with, and that would likely have an impact on his behaviour, whether that be that he was quite upset or certain things would kind of trigger him, and then behaviours would come out that seemingly kind of appeared from nowhere, but it became quite apparent that this was linked to some kind of anxiety. And that's quite difficult to deal with as a parent. It's difficult to deal with, obviously, your child being anxious in general, and then it's very difficult to deal with some of the behaviours that come out from that.
Mm,
We've found that hard over the years, and even though we know now why it's happening, and the fact that Max really doesn't have any control over it, it's an impulse. It's yeah, it's been quite stressful at points, and having some indication of why that might be the case has been really quite healing for me in particular, I think, and helped us better understand how we can support him to try and preempt what might be happening to avoid some of these situations, so that he's then not in a stressful situation, but we're all learning. And yeah, just it's a journey that
mm.
I can imagine so many of you are on. So not only have you got the anxiety that your child has, but also I think you have a lot of anxiety as a parent as well.
Yeah, and I think for any parent, it's so unbelievably difficult when your child is having struggles in nursery or at school. But
Mm.
how was it with the biting? Because I think a lot of parents can relate to that. You know, I felt really sorry for you, well, and sorry for you during this time because I understood, why Max was doing it. But of course, it's so natural to feel anxious about how other parents will feel about it. So yeah, how did you feel? And I know it's calmed down a lot now.
The nursery have been absolutely incredible and have worked really, really well with us to try and kind of avoid the situations where they're debriefing to us in front of other parents, because obviously that's just not great for anybody. And actually, Max started to realise what was going on as well. So
Mm,
yeah, they've been fantastic about, taking it offline and making sure they speak to me in a sort of private situation, which has been massively helpful. But I think any parent of a child with SEN will recognize that even if you're not being outwardly judged, the perception of being
mhm,
judged by other parents and how other parents might perceive you is probably
mhm.
stronger actually than the judgment that is happening. And I've definitely been on that journey, and I'm still on that journey of really starting to kind of let go of that. Um, but it's been hard. It's been very difficult for me, I would say. Yeah, just feeling like, why is this happening? Other people are going to be thinking, what's she doing wrong as a parent? Why is her
Mm,
child doing this? And obviously, you don't shout from the rooftops that your child has special educational needs, and that's potentially why this is happening. It's kind of that very personal battle that you're going through in your head of just you knowing why, and having to almost justify that sometimes to yourself. So yeah, it's been a massive journey, to which I wouldn't say that I was there on, but I'm definitely in a better place with it than I was before.
100%. I think we can all relate to that, even when you're out and about and
Mm,
they're having a meltdown about something or,
yeah.
it just being incredibly hard work and you know why, but you straight away, and I think as parents across the board feel this way, but all you can think of is everybody staring at me, is everybody
Yes.
judging me? And I think for many parents, it can really, I'm sure, put you off going to places like busy parks and busy soft
Hmm.
plays because you think if something does happen, everybody around you is judging you. And I think, I don't know about you, but I feel there's been so much more discussion around additional needs now that there is more of an understanding. But I feel like there's such a long way to go still. And
Absolutely.
yeah, I completely relate to what you were just saying.
Yeah, and for me as well, there is such a long way to go, but really finding people that do understand has been really helpful. And I hope that even if you're listening to this podcast and thinking, I feel like I'm the only one, you're really, really not.
No, you're
And
not.
that for me is really important for people to know, if they're listening, that you're not the only one going through this. And Amy and I have been really fortunate to find a group of ladies that really understand, because they're in similar situations themselves, and that's been wonderful.
I think that's been a game changer for me, finding a group of girls locally, or guys, mix of people that are going through the same thing that you can we meet up about once a month and we just chat about our children, and some of the funniest conversations because we just all get it. Like nothing surprises any of us, does it?
No,
It's like, oh
no.
yeah, that's happened to us last week, or so yeah. If there's any way you can connect with, I don't even know how we got together now. Do you? I think we might have met out and about, and then
Yeah, it was
started messing.
literally
I don't
that.
know.
I think some of us knew different people. I think you might have been the connector actually, Amy, in many ways. But yeah, people knew people, and then we've kind of just come together, and it's great. And I
Yeah,
suppose in a similar kind of vein to that is that finding a really strong Senko who really understands your child and who you
yeah.
feel is kind of on your side has been really important as well.
Yeah, the setting has so much to play,
Yeah,
when you get them in a good setting, like you say, with a Senko that really understands, or a team of people that are working with you, they just thrive in
they
those
really do.
environments. So, as you say, the nursery have been amazing, haven't they? And they've sort of put things in place to help Max.
Yeah, I mean, they've been life changing, like even just down to things like making sure that there's a quiet area for him so that he can go and calm down, and starting to teach him techniques which empower him, I think, to take control of some of these things. And also, for me, the biggest and most important part of it is that they really champion him and they speak very positively about him. There's a lot of positive words that they use, and they big him up, which is so important for a child with SEN because it can really knock their confidence in certain areas. So to have for them to be that champion for him, amazing. Absolutely amazing. Because we all try at home, don't we? But you have less control over what goes on outside of your home environment. So to find that has been amazing. We've been really, really fortunate. But I know for you, Amy, that it hasn't been that kind of necessarily smooth ride. And Max was at a previous nursery before, but again, they did support him.
Yeah, I think finding a setting with a good Senko and teachers that want your child to do well and work with you to get the best out of them, is you just can't ask for any more than that. And yeah, you're right. Alex was at a nursery before, and they just had like really little experience with children on the spectrum. And my advice to anyone currently looking at a setting, as we've sort of talked about there, is to make sure that the staff understand they've got a good Senko in place, because honestly, it makes such a difference. And it's funny because before John, my husband, and I knew about my son Alex, we chose a nursery based on the fact it had a car park. So ridiculous.
No, but it's
And
not ridiculous because especially as to be fair, when you're first looking at nurseries, some of the things that we now know wouldn't necessarily be apparent
no,
to you, would they? You know, at nine
no.
months, 6 months, sometimes in some places before children are even born, you're putting their name down for nursery. So it's not ridiculous, but
Yeah,
now
very
looking back,
true.
I understand why you laugh.
And also like, oh, all the equipment's brand new, and now I think, my gosh, like just would look at it with completely different, perspective now. But like you say, I was none the wiser. And now I'd be like, can I meet your Senko, please, and your staff? And I want to know everything that they're going to do to put in place for my child. But yeah, like you say, so much more thought has to go into everything as a special needs parent, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And there's so many more things that you need to think of. We've just recently gone through picking a school and that journey. So,
Mm,
the thought that's had to go into that rather than just necessarily, do I think my child would be happy here? There's so much more than just would my child be happy here, because what goes into making your child happy is much more complex in many cases than just necessarily, your sort of typical child.
yeah, definitely. So shall I talk a bit about Alex?
Yeah. Yeah, let's hear about Alex.
So yes, Alex's journey's been very different to Max's. I would say we first noticed something wasn't right about 10 months old. So he stopped engaging with us. He definitely didn't point, wave, or clap. And my mum, who's got 11 grandchildren, can you believe it?
Wow.
Said to me that she didn't think something was quite right, and I just typically got so defensive, and I was like, "It's lockdown. It'll be fine once he starts nursery." But yeah, she was onto something, and it's just so hard to hear at first, especially with your first, that something isn't right because
Mm.
Of course, the first thing I did was blame myself, thinking, "What am I not doing right?" You know, I've
Yeah,
wanted a child for so long. Like, what's going on? What am I doing wrong? And I think everyone can agree, you just straight away blame yourself. Like, it must be me. I must be doing something terribly wrong. He didn't have any eye contact and he wouldn't play with toys how I would have expected him to. You know, I've got lots of nieces and nephews and I've seen them grow up and I was thinking, why is he more interested in the wheels of the cars or, stones was a massive thing for him. I don't know if it was for Max, but he just used to collect stones. Or we go to the park and there's all this equipment everywhere and all he wanted to do was sit on the floor and play with the stones. And he never sort of handed me anything, he just seemed really disengaged. For us, it wasn't until he started nursery. They
yeah,
said, he wasn't turning to noises and they'd say his name and he wouldn't look. And yeah, straight away went on the blame train again. What have I not
yeah,
been doing? And anyway, we
yeah.
got his ears tested and Alex had glue ear. So we thought, okay, well, this is obviously the problem. Once it clears, the words will start forming and he'll turn to more sounds. Anyway, it cleared um, by the time he was about 18 months and he still wasn't responding to his name or saying any words and just playing independently, just was not interested in other children at all. So at 18 months, we made an appointment to see the paediatrician through the health visitor. And the paediatrician saw Alex, who strolled on in to a load of toys on the floor. And I just remember he sat under the trolley and played with the wheels. And I just took one look at her and she said, "We don't tend to diagnose this early, but I'll put him on the list and I'll write on the report he should be seen as a child with autism."
Wow. So that was the first time that you'd heard the word autism.
Yeah.
How did that make you feel?
Well, literally just cried all the way home. Do you know what? I had no idea what autism was. That sounds awful, but I'd heard of autism, but I didn't know what it was. Started thinking, what does that mean? What does that mean for our future?
Mm.
Yeah, the fear and the sadness was really hard. And then I just switched to, right, well, what can I do to help him? So there's loads of free courses about autism out there. So I straight away found one of those and joined up. I then started searching for speech and language therapists that did private work locally, which I know a lot of people can't afford to do. But even if family can just help with 2 sessions a month, or we're lucky at this stage to be doing it once a week, but at first it was just every other week. She has made so much difference for Alex. So, yes, I found a private speech and language therapist, started to research educational healthcare plans that we will definitely discuss in more detail. Yeah, I just basically was just Googling frantically to find anything I could to help him.
Yeah. I can definitely relate to that. I went into a bit of fix it mode
Yeah,
and just
yeah,
tried to find as much information as possible. And going back to why we're doing this podcast, and this is exactly one of the reasons why, because there's lots of courses out there and that's wonderful. But
mm,
I just wanted to hear from someone that I felt like was
yeah.
like me. I wanted to feel like I could have a chat with somebody. So, yeah, do you think you threw yourself into it like people do after they've kind of got grief? Because it feels sometimes like that kind of journey, doesn't it?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. It was like a defense mechanism in a way. Like I have to do something to help with the grief because I was feeling grief. And I think so many of you will understand this, but you just feel like you suddenly don't have the child you thought you had. And of course, you love them so much, but I longed for him to be at the stage that he should have been. He should have been saying words at this point, playing with me. There was no sort of back and forth type of communication. And I did like all of you, I'm sure, are doing, which is to get into their world, which I then, after reading a lot about autism, that's the biggest thing. I have to get into his world and I have to learn how to do that. like you say, I think it was very much a fight or flight situation. I mean, I
Mm,
remember my dad calling me when I got back and he said, "Are you all right?" And I said, "No, no." I said, "I think Alex has got autism." Sorry, I'm getting emotional now. Yeah, I said, "I think he's got autism and I don't know what this means.
mm,
I don't know what this means for our future. I don't know what this I don't know." And he just said, "Everything's going to be fine and you're going to be his biggest advocate in life," which is so unbelievably true.
yeah,
And you're going to know him better than anybody does. You're going to be his safe space in a world that's going to be quite scary for him.
yeah,
And I
yeah.
remember him saying these words, and I thought, oh my gosh. And yeah, it just became something that I had to learn about very quickly, and I'm sure you were the same,
Yeah.
and had to find ways to help him. And,
Mm,
as I say, the speech and language therapist has been amazing. And, getting him into a nursery that have a good understanding of his needs. And, I think some people will use Makaton, some people use PECs, which is what Alex uses. So they're, communication cards to help him better navigate the world and as a form of his communication. And yeah, it like you said, it's been a real journey so far. It's still ongoing. But I think you can agree, Kirst, like, and we'll talk about this in more detail, but what Alex is doing now compared to like 3 years ago when I found out that it could be autism,
mm,
what he's achieving now, I wish I could just go back, give myself a massive hug and say everything's going to be all right.
yeah.
And I'm sure you'd say the same.
That's such an interesting point, and actually kind of raises two things for me. What two separate conversations that I've had in the last week. One, sat down with a mum who literally said, "If only we could have a crystal ball." And I know so
Mm,
many people feel like that in so many different situations, but wouldn't it be
yeah.
amazing? And then I was having a chat today with a lovely colleague of mine whose child has neurodiversity and is now out the other side of education. Well, actually, is at university studying, and she said, honestly, she said the child that they are at this point in terms of where we are, Amy and I, she said you won't even recognise them when they're older. So they
Mm,
just won't be the same child because it's a journey. Your child will change, they'll grow. The things that you were concerned about when they were 4 are not going to be the same concerns that you have at 18. Not to say that there are not different concerns, but yeah, but wouldn't we all love to have that crystal ball? Because so much of it is, I think, fear. A
oh,
lot of it's
yeah.
about fear, and
Yeah.
there's a lot of preconceived ideas of what autism looks like, what ADHD looks like, some of it really misinformation, some of it misunderstanding.
Yeah.
When we found out from nursery was who raised it to us that they believed that there was neurodiversity potentially with Max. I then immediately called a family member, and the response was kind of, oh goodness, as if that was a kind of like a sentence that he was being given. And I
Mm,
remember I jumped on the kind of defensive thinking, no, like it's going to be okay, because I just try and be positive. And for me, I came out of the meeting and I didn't cry. I almost felt, for me it was a very different emotion. When I found out about Max, it was almost a relief, because for so long I'd kind of wondered, this doesn't seem typical. Why is
yeah.
this happening? Am I just a really bad parent? What am I doing wrong? It was almost a relief that there might be an explanation
Yeah.
to some of this.
100%. Yeah.
But then we went through the whole cycle of emotions that you go through, because it is such a journey, and we're still on that journey as you are. Fear, grief, not knowing what the future holds, worrying that you then you let go of the child that you thought you were going to have, and the journey you thought you were going to have, even though
Mm,
that that's kind of almost daft, because no one really knows what the future holds. But you kind of almost have this idea of what you want for your child, maybe based on your own upbringing and what you achieved, and you want
yeah.
better for them. And it's kind of then learning to, okay, stand back, I've got to let go of some of that now.
Yeah.
Manage expectations that I don't even know what those expectations are going to be. And it's the
Yeah.
wild unknown, I think, that we've found quite difficult to navigate over the last year.
100%. And I think so many people can relate to that. And again, why we've done this podcast, because it's so nice to hear from, somebody else saying the same things that I felt, but also the crystal ball thing. I mean, it really resonates with me because you just think if I could look even in 5 years and just know he's going to be okay. And for Alex, I would say he's pre-verbal, but he was non-verbal for a very long time. He only has still a handful of words. And for me, and I'm sure many people listening, the longing for him to talk is unbelievable. I've got a Facebook group that I'm a part of, and I constantly type in there, started talking. I mean, probably took this probably once a week I'm doing that.
Mm.
And then I'm reading all the posts to see when their child started speaking and when, and was it just a word? Was it a sentence? And you become fixated
Yeah,
on that. And
yeah.
again, it's that crystal ball. If you could look in 5 years and they were talking, gosh, you'd be like, right, chill out,
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely. Yeah, you should
sit
have
up
just
with a cup
enjoyed
of
your
tea and
child.
just,
Yeah, just, stop worrying about that at that
yes,
moment and just be present with them. And it's very easy to say that, isn't it? Oh yeah, be present and just enjoy them, when actually there's a lot of stress around that. And Max is verbal now. He communicates verbally. And he's caught up, I think, to a certain degree with his speech. Uh, So I can empathise with where you feel. We were there for a short period, and I found that very, very stressful.
yeah,
It's other challenges that we have now, and even though he has communication, that sometimes can cause other challenges. Actually, in terms of how even though he's got words, it's being able to manage the huge array of emotions that comes with this, and not necessarily knowing what emotions are, and putting words to those. So yeah, it just sometimes seems like kind of one thing after another.
yeah. And we will be so in the next, we're going to have guests on, but we will just be talking about our week, verbal or not. We all have challenges that we face. And I think, again, it's nice to hear from somebody that's going through different things and not just challenges, things that they are doing. So,
Yeah, great things as well.
yeah, and that for me has been one of the best things is I have no expectations for Alex. I just anything that he does that he wasn't doing a year ago, I am just we're all proud of our children, but it's
Mm.
it's another level with him because, for example, I mean, he's 4 now. So a year ago, I wouldn't be able to have said to him, go and get your shoes. So he pulls we've got, one of those IKEA shoe cabinets that you pull the drawer down and get your shoes out. He goes and gets his shoes out and he attempts to put them on. He gets undressed for the bath now, sleeps under a duvet. I mean, he slept in a sleeping bag for so long. Joins in group activities at nursery. And to be honest, he just seems to be kind of going at life at his own pace. Your child might be 18 months and you're at the stage that I was where you're navigating whether or not this is more than just hearing problems. And then
Mm.
you're thinking, well, what does 4 look like? And it's not going to be the same for every child, but I think it's just so nice to hear from someone saying, you know, even a year ago, there's no way I could have said to him, could you go and get your shoes out? And he'd go and get them out. So again, I just think it takes them longer to process things and to do things that other children are doing at their age. And the myth around, we'll talk more about myths as well, but the myth around that children aren't with autism aren't cuddly. I mean, Alex is obsessed with hugs and, very loving and caring, as is Max.
Yes, but not as much as Alex.
Yeah,
Alex
Alex
loves
does
a
love a
hug.
cuddle.
Max loves a hug on his own terms.
But that was another thing, wasn't it? So I was telling Kirsty that Alex is doing settle-ins at school at the moment because they're both starting in September. So he goes for half an hour on a Monday afternoon, which is fab because he's meeting the teachers, he's getting to know the children that are going to be in his class. And I was just sat to the side, this week, and a little girl came up to him and said, "What's your name?" And obviously Alex didn't respond. And she said it again, and he just sort of stood there staring at her. And I sort of jumped out of my seat and sort of ran over, and I put my arm around Alex and I said, "What's your name?" And she said, "My name's Jessica," or whatever her name was. And I said, "Hi, Jessica, this is Alex." I said, "Alex doesn't speak yet, but I said, I tell you what, he absolutely loves hugs. So would you like a hug? You can always ask him for a hug." And she said, "Oh, Alex, would you give me a hug?" And then they hugged, and I walked away
Oh,
and I was like, oh, wow, it doesn't matter that he doesn't speak. They've just communicated in another way. And I just thought it's just so kids are just amazing, aren't they? Like he's
yeah,
yes, he doesn't speak, but in her eyes, in that moment, he hugged like anybody else, and he wasn't any different to anybody else. And I sat back down, I looked over, and he was trying to put something, it was a cup on, a little holdall thing, and she helped him do it, and he let her help her. Because in that moment there was a bond formed, and yes, there was no words, but honestly, I just sat there and I thought, you're going to be all right. It's going to be
yeah.
okay. And it's just, yeah, I just
But it
thought I
just
had to mention that because it was just such a lovely moment.
but so much of communication is not necessarily just words, is it?
Yeah,
So, oh, that's such a lovely story, actually, and
yeah.
amazing parenting from you as well, I think.
Well, I just think again, school's another level, isn't it?
Yeah,
And
it
we
is.
will be talking
Yeah,
about school in more detail in another episode, but school is, nursery's one thing, and then school you're like, oh, but
yeah.
just to be there, and I know Max is doing settle-in sessions as well, and just to be
Mm.
there and witness those moments, for a split second, you're like, it's all right, it's going to be okay, and then you go back to, oh,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's for me, it's massively celebrating the wins as well, and the wins feel special, don't they? You
oh
know, where
yeah,
in a similar kind of situation, Max is settling into his school. They're going to different schools, but he had his first session where he had to go in on his own, and he's been incredibly anxious about it. The weekend before this settle, we had quite a lot of meltdowns, and you could tell he was very stressed about it. Consistently saying, "I don't want to go in on my own." To which the school were great. I spoke to them and they said, "It's okay. We'll work it out. Dad can come in," because it was my husband that was taking him to this particular settle. "Dad can come in with Max and support him, and we'll just see how the session goes," which was brilliant because that's what you want to feel like, that the school is with you, not working
yes
against
it
you, and
is,
that they
yeah.
kind of get your child. So we did a huge amount of work with Max over the last week, kind of leading up to the settle session, talking to him about it, lots of social stories, walking past the school, and to our absolute, I guess, shock in some sense, but delight in others, he walked in on his own, and
Oh,
he
that's
was
amazing.
so proud of himself when he came out and said, "I went in on my own." We were like, "Yeah, you did."
Oh.
Yeah, and it's so emotional. And you just feel so incredibly proud, but the amount of work that has to go into kind of doing what appears to be just a normal, typical, straightforward thing is
Mm.
where, you have to be just on it as a parent, don't you?
Yeah. And I think it was you and I having the discussion about some parents of putting on Facebook, my child's so ready for school,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
just in conversation, oh yeah, she's so ready. Oh yeah, he's so ready for school. And you're like, okay, great,
I
good for
want to be,
you.
yeah, I think I want to be in that situation. I really, really do. Yeah.
Of course you do. You
Yeah,
just think, oh, how wonderful would it be? They were just, starting
absolutely.
in September. They're just going to wander through the door and just wave, but goodbye, mum, bye. It's going to
Yeah.
have a lovely time. And it isn't the case for us. But, I just think, again, so many children come on in that first year. I mean, I keep hearing that from so many people. So, I'm terrified, but I'm also really like excited for them both, because I think that first year at school can have such a massive impact on both of them in such a positive way. Um, and for Alex, I don't know what school looks like in a year's time. Year one is very different to reception. Um, he's going to have to be at a certain level, which he might not be. And I just said to the teachers, there's got to be an open dialogue about how he's getting on and how you feel he's doing, and if we need to go down, you know, um, special schools, then we will, and we'll approach that like we've done with everything, and just start looking around properly and all of that sort of thing.
Mm.
But for me, I felt because because his understanding is at a quite good level now, I just thought I've got to give him a chance at mainstream. And if it's not right, then we'll take him out and we'll put him somewhere that will be better suited for him. But again, we'll definitely get somebody on from a teacher from a special needs school, someone, talking about special needs schools, because what they can do for children is incredible. And again, that's another thing, you have to navigate what you think is best for your child. But yeah, it's a minefield, isn't it?
It absolutely is. It really, really is. There's a lot of parallels, isn't there, between you and
Mm,
I? And one of the other things that we bonded over was the fact that we actually have 1-year-old girls as well. They were born within a couple of sort of months. Well, it was a couple of weeks, really, wasn't it, of
yeah.
each other? So another reason. I think, in fact, that was the very first reason why we met, was because we met through on a well-known mum app. Uh,
Yes.
because I was moving to the area and was pregnant with my daughter, and and we sort of matched on there, and that's how we ended up talking, really. So, how's that been for you? I guess in terms of the journey of adding a new sibling into the dynamic.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely had that chat of, do you think this is a good idea, with
Mm,
Alex and his needs and everything else? And I always wanted to, John always wanted to, and we just thought, why not? And again, on Instagram, I follow somebody, which a lot of you may be following, who has a son who's older, and she decided to have another one and had a little girl. And I've just been watching them and their bond getting stronger and stronger and stronger, and thinking, I want that for Alex. I want him to have a sibling that just will probably understand him better than anybody, probably better than me. And, many people will be wondering whether to have another one. And, again, based on their need, I can understand the fear behind going again. Some people will just think, look, it's too much. But for me, it was the best thing I ever did, to be honest, Kirst. I stopped thinking about what what I could be doing more for Alex all the time. It became all consuming. Like every day I'd be thinking, shall I buy that toy because maybe we can interact with that? Or shall I get that? And I just kept buying all this stuff. John was like, why is there so many Amazon parcels all the time? I was like, I'm trying to communicate with my son, so I'm just buying like every single sensory toy I can think
yeah,
of and I can
sensory toys.
find.
Yeah.
Apparently he really likes cogs. So I'm like, John's just like, oh my God. But I just stopped thinking about what I could be doing for him all the time because I had a baby to look after, and just watching his independence growing because of that, because I wasn't anticipating his needs all the time. He had to come and grab me to get something. Alex, would you mind picking that up for mummy? I remember saying that when I first had a baby, and family members would be like, oh, he'll help you all the time. And I'm like, he doesn't understand what I'm saying. He can't help me all the time. And then give him a few months. Suddenly it's like, Alex, could you pick Isabel's dummy up? Could you grab that for mummy? And he started to pick stuff off the floor, and you could see his little face was like, yep, I did that, and his independence started growing, and his interest in her is getting stronger. And yeah, I really do believe she'll know him better than anyone. And what about you? How have you found it?
I think it's been a bit of a journey for us, actually. I think Max really recognised what life was like before having a sibling, and I think we've been through what many parents can probably relate to, where um, it's kind of finding that sibling dynamic and
Mm,
navigating that, and in some ways, probably some jealousy around a new baby. Max, um, he really likes the attention of being with us a lot. So obviously bringing in a new baby to that who needs attention too is something that he's had to navigate. And I think he really, really loves her. And sometimes it's knowing how to express those emotions is a journey that we're on at the moment. But yeah, just I think it's been she's kind of come along and just slotted in to our
yeah.
family, really. And I think will bring out a good side of him and will teach him a lot over the years. I think she'll really teach him skills that we might not have been able to have taught him on our own.
Yeah. And I don't know about you, but even just watching how Isabel interacts with him already is that
Mm,
she's already started to realised that she can't interact with him like she would interact with another child because he just needs her to be a lot calmer. She
Mm,
hands him stuff all the time. I find she just like constantly reaches out to him with something and goes ta ta. And that's another thing, by the way. The fact that she's now saying words is mind blowing for John and I because we've waited 4 years to hear a
mm,
word come out of Alex's mouth. So it feels like I'm parenting all over again. It's been really reassuring as well that there was nothing you did wrong the first time. You're parenting exactly the same. They're just two very different children on their own journey, and
yeah,
that it's okay.
yeah, absolutely.
So we have so much more to discuss, including the schools we've chosen, the HCP process. We'll go into detail about that. How our partners have found it. Be good to get them on. Actually, I don't know if that's ever going to happen, Kirsty, but we will try.
We hope.
Um, yeah, the myths surrounding autism because there's so many myths, and the different techniques we've implemented to help because I think that could be really useful. And we'll be getting some really great guests on too.
Yeah, so if you've got any ideas or topics that you particularly want us to cover, you feel would be helpful to hear from us on, then please send us a message on Instagram at love_needs_no words. And thank you so much for
Thank you
listening.
so much for listening.
Till next time,
Bye.
bye.
Bye.